Good evening from the National Weather Service office in Lake Charles. I'm meteorologist Donald Jones, and if you're wondering why I'm a couple of minutes late here, actually almost 10 minutes late here, it's because we're having all kinds of audio issues. Hopefully you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me here this evening. It looks like we finally got it sorted out, but you know, it's the first hurricane of the season that's affecting us, so of course we're going to have our share of growing pains as well. In fact, I'm still throwing stuff together as I'm talking to you here. I was kind of hesitant to jump into doing these Facebook Live briefings because it is very early in the season. We're only talking about okay, everybody says they can hear me. That's great. We're only talking about the second named storm of the season, and it's only the first week of July. So we weren't expecting to be getting together again this soon in the 2024 hurricane season, but we were expecting a very active hurricane season, and it has indeed started off with a bang. Obviously, I'm sure you're very well aware of what was Major Hurricane Beryl as it moved through the Caribbean. It made landfall across the Yucatan Peninsula early this morning and has now been downgraded to a tropical storm, but it is expected to reemerge in the southern Gulf of Mexico. And that forecast track has been gradually shifting slightly to the north through the day today, and we're now looking at a landfall somewhere probably around the Corpus Christi area sometime in the day on Monday. So that's close enough to our area that I felt like we needed to kind of discuss it, let everybody know what's going on. I know I've been getting a lot of questions about it over the last several days, and it's definitely time to start talking about it because we are going to see some impacts across our area. They're not going to be dramatic. We're not looking for hurricane force winds across our area. So let me start right off the top there and just kind of alleviate your concerns immediately. But we are going to be looking at a fair bit of rainfall, if not with the storm itself, and definitely its remnants as it moves across the area here as we get into the early and mid parts of next week. We're also going to be looking at the possibility of some coastal flooding. Now, those impacts could potentially get larger if that forecast track continues to shift further to the north, which there is some indication, unfortunately, that it might. So let's talk about that here over the next little while. As always, this is a live interactive briefing if you're joining us for the first time. So we will answer all of your questions, or as many as we can get to once we wrap up our briefing. We're going to go ahead and jump into it here. But if you do have a question or comment, feel free to throw them in our comment section here, and we'll happily answer them for you in just a little while. We are also broadcasting on YouTube and hopefully X if it's working properly. We're still kind of experimenting with that, but hopefully we're on those platforms as well, so you can watch us and share accordingly from that. Let's go ahead and jump into our briefing, though. Again, we're looking at now Tropical Storm Beryl. Maximum sustained winds are down to about 65 miles per hour this evening. This was one of the last visible satellite images that we had of Beryl this evening. Let me see if I can make this full screen for you so you can get a little bit nicer view of it there. And there it is. You know, it's still a pretty well-defined looking storm system. Obviously, moving across land, it's been diminishing through the day. But being a strong tropical storm, it's not going to take a whole heck of a lot to fix my camera here for it to begin to re-intensify again. And actually, the forecast is for it to re-intensify into a hurricane as it moves across the Gulf of Mexico here over the next couple of days or so. Let's take a look at the latest forecast track from the National Hurricane Center. There it is. Get me out of the way here. This is as of 7 p.m. There'll be another update here at 10 p.m., so another about hour and 15 minutes or so. I don't expect a significant change to the forecast track with that update, but maybe a little bit of tweaking here and there. Again, maximum sustained winds near 65 miles an hour. And the forecast track is for it to continue generally to the northwest here over the next 36, 48 hours or so. And it is forecast to make a landfall as a Category 1 hurricane sometime on Monday, right around the Corpus Christi area as of right now. You can see those areas highlighted in pink. Those are hurricane watches that have been posted for parts of northern Mexico and across parts of south and central Texas. Now, we are currently in our area, southeast Texas, southwest Louisiana. We are not under any watches or warnings at this time, so don't worry about that at the moment. Should this track continue further to the north, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we could see ourselves under some kind of a tropical storm watch either tonight or tomorrow if that track shifts a little bit further to the north. But at present, we have no watches and warnings in effect across our area. The bigger concern is that even on this track, the hurricane is going to make landfall somewhere around the Corpus Christi area, and then the remnants, as it kind of decays and breaks down, is going to work further to the north across East Texas. And what that's going to do is it's going to bring a whole lot of rain to our area. You know, we're familiar with those, you know, kind of sloppy tropical storms moving up across our area and dropping just inches and inches and inches of rain. And unfortunately, that looks like what our biggest impacts are going to be is going to come in the form of some very heavy rainfall as we head into into from starting Monday essentially through Wednesday as the storm and the remnants of the storm move across parts of eastern Texas. I want to talk to you a little bit about what's actually driving the storm. And to do this, I left this blank because I want to switch over to a different graphic here. This is courtesy of our friends over at windy.com. But it does a pretty good job. Let me see if I can go back to what I wanted to actually show you here. I changed this when I was looking at stuff earlier. Bear with me just a moment. I'll pull the winds back up. Okay, what I want to show you here is actually the winds in the mid-levels of the atmosphere here. So we're looking about 500 millibars, for those that are familiar with what that is. That's about halfway up in the atmosphere. And what's actually driving this storm, let me come back to me so I can point at some things. So here's the hurricane, and we have this trough of low pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere. It's right here. This is actually what brings cold fronts sometimes, and we actually have a very weak frontal boundary that's going to be moving across our area. Don't get any ideas. It's not going to cool us off any. But what it's going to do is actually pull Beryl more to the northeast. That ridge that we were talking about all last week that was sitting over us, that has actually shifted off to the east across the southeastern U.S. now. You can see that clockwise rotation across parts of Florida, Alabama. That's also going to kind of push Beryl to the northwest. Now, we don't have that shield, if you will, that protection sitting over us anymore. That's why that track has ever so slightly been shifting to the north. This low pressure area is essentially going to pull Beryl into it as we get into the early parts of next week. That's why it's going to start off kind of on this northwesterly track and then eventually kind of turn more to the north into that area of low pressure and that trough. That's kind of what's driving Beryl here and why the forecast track is the way that it is. Now, as far as the intensity of Beryl, again, we are expecting Beryl to continue to intensify here over the next couple of days as it moves through the Gulf. Part of that reason, very warm sea surface temperatures. We are still looking at extremely warm sea surface temperatures across the Gulf of Mexico, ranging from 85 to 87 degrees. So very, very warm temperatures, which are certainly conducive for additional tropical development. Now, the Hurricane Center has indicated it's going to take about 24 hours or so for the storm to actually kind of get its act back together, if you will. What happens when hurricanes make landfall, or any tropical system makes landfall, the circulation of the storm in the mid-levels of the atmosphere gets disrupted. So what has to happen is the storm actually has to get back oriented kind of on top of itself before it can really begin to intensify again. And the Hurricane Center has indicated it's going to take about 24 hours once the storm moves back offshore for that to happen. Now, it is going to move back offshore sometime this evening, probably within the next couple of hours or so. And then that'll kind of start that clock. We'll be looking at about 18 to 24 hours for the storm to kind of get itself reoriented again. And then we expect some additional strengthening to occur thereafter. But conditions, a lot of fuel in the Gulf of Mexico right now, very favorable for that development once that storm gets reoriented. The other thing we look at when we're talking about storm development is wind shear. This is a look at the current wind shear across the Gulf of Mexico. You can see there is some in the central Gulf of Mexico, but not a whole lot really. There is going to be a little bit that'll help hinder the kind of rapid intensification that was seen across the eastern Caribbean. So we're not expecting a rapidly intensifying storm, but these wind shear is not going to be enough to necessarily stop it from developing or stop a gradual strengthening trend over the next couple of days. So we are still expecting the storm to re-intensify. It is expected to be a Category 1 hurricane at landfall across parts of central Texas. Now, something in my mouth. Let's start talking about impacts across our area. The first one, and the one that everybody's most interested in, is wind. Obviously, wind is sexy. Wind is what everybody wants to know because that is what that's what we use to calculate the categorical scale of hurricanes. So what I'm showing you here, this is the probability of seeing tropical storm force winds at some part or anywhere across our area and really across Texas too, with this storm. So you can see across parts of southeast Texas, we're looking at anywhere between a 10 to 20% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. That's 20 mile per hour or greater winds anywhere across southeast Texas. For southwest Louisiana, the probability is lower. We're looking right now at about a 5 to 10% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds across those areas. And of course, as you go further south, down towards Galveston, Corpus Christi, those probabilities increase significantly. So down towards the Corpus Christi area, we're already looking at a 60 to 70% chance of seeing those tropical storm force winds. But the overall probability of seeing significant winds across our area is still very low. It's not zero, but it is very low right now. Now, the probability of seeing hurricane force winds are even lower. So we're looking at a less than 5% chance of seeing hurricane force winds, that's 74 miles an hour or greater, anywhere across southeast Texas or southwest Louisiana. Now, further south across the area that it's going to be making landfall, Corpus Christi down towards Brownsville, those areas are looking at right now about a 10 to 20-ish% chance of seeing those hurricane force winds. That's assuming that Beryl actually re-intensifies into a hurricane before it makes landfall. Now, what I want to talk about here next, this is the most likely time of arrival of those tropical storm force winds. So low probability of seeing tropical storm force winds, but if we do see them, this is when we can expect to see them. So we're going to be looking at those most likely to begin sometime late Monday morning, perhaps early Monday morning right along the immediate coastline, but we're going to be looking at it spreading inland through the day if we see those tropical storm force winds. Again, probability is very low, 5 to 10% chance. But if we see them, it'll be during the day on Monday. So that's kind of the time frame you want to keep in mind, that if the track does wind up shifting further to the north and we start looking at more wind impacts, that's when we can expect them to actually begin. Don't worry, I just killed myself. It's fine. This is another graphic that we show often. This is the earliest reasonable time of arrival. So this is kind of, if the storm moves a little bit faster than expected, this is when we can expect the storm to actually, the earliest that we can expect those tropical storm force winds to arrive would be sometime during the day on Sunday. So most likely, say late Monday morning into midday Monday, the earliest possible would be about 24 hours earlier, so Sunday morning. That's assuming that the hurricane actually speeds up, which again, that's not expected. But if that happens, that gives you an idea as far as the time frame regarding that. All right, so that's about all I have to say about the winds. Again, where the overall probability of seeing significant winds across the area remains very low, unless that forecast track shifts significantly further to the north. The bigger overall threat is going to be the potential for heavy rainfall. Again, with the storm kind of lifting to the north across the area as a depression or as a remnant, we're still going to be looking at a lot of rainfall. The graphic behind me here is the excessive rainfall outlook from the storm or from the Weather Prediction Center. You're probably familiar with this graphic if you've tuned in for any of our briefings regarding severe thunderstorms, flash flooding, that kind of thing. There is a slight risk of excessive rainfall. This is actually for tomorrow. This is not even related to Beryl, but that cold front that I was talking about, that trough that's going to pull Beryl kind of to the north after it makes landfall, that's actually going to sink into our area tomorrow. So we are going to be looking at the potential for some scattered showers and thunderstorms, and some of those will have the potential to be heavy on tomorrow. So not out of the realm of possibility, we could pick up a quick couple of inches from that, completely unrelated to Tropical Storm Beryl. Going into Sunday, the overall probability is still very low. Again, this is unrelated to Beryl. This is more just that stationary frontal boundary and those typical afternoon thunderstorms. By the time we get to Monday, that's when Beryl's going to be making landfall and beginning that turn kind of more to the north. That's when we're expecting the more widespread thunderstorms and the heavy rainfall from those tropical rain bands to begin across our area. So we're looking at a slight risk of excessive rainfall. That's pretty much the probability of seeing flash flooding. You can see the graphic there. The yellows, that is a slight risk, or at least a 15% chance of seeing flash flooding across parts of southeast Texas, and then a marginal risk, that's a 5% chance of seeing flash flooding across southwest Louisiana on Monday. Now, these probabilities will go up as the forecast becomes more certain and as we get closer in time. Looking at Tuesday, we're going to see kind of a continuation of those rain bands moving across the area. So we're still going to be looking at a fairly decent risk for flash flooding. Pretty much the entire area is in a 15% chance of seeing flash flooding across southeast Texas or southwest Louisiana on Tuesday. And this very well could linger into Wednesday as well, depending on exactly how fast the storm winds up moving. So potentially 3 days of heavy rainfall associated with Beryl, even if it doesn't make a direct impact across our area. This is a look at the forecast rainfall totals across the region from that. Let me get me out of the way here so you can take a look at the legend. The light yellows there across large parts of southeast Texas, that's 4 to 6 inches of rain. The dark oranges, or the light oranges, I should say, that's closer to 6 to 8 inches of rain. So that's what we call our widespread totals. We can expect anywhere between 4 and 8 inches of rain widespread across parts of southeast Texas and western Louisiana. Now, within that, we could get those training bands that, if you've been in a hurricane or been in this area for any length of time, you're familiar with what I'm talking about. These bands of storms that are either along or behind the decaying tropical system as it moves inland, and they move over the same area, sometimes a very narrow area for a long, long time, and they drop a whole lot of rainfall. Beaumont, Port Arthur, you're all too familiar with this from the Hurricane Harveys of the world and previous events like that. So we very easily could see double those numbers in a few locations if we get one of those bands set up. So we're calling for widespread amounts of 4 to 8. Local amounts up to 15 inches, not out of the realm of possibility if we get one of those bands set up somewhere across the region. So that's kind of what we're looking at with this system as far as the rainfall goes. And come along, little button. I'm gonna do it this way then. Okay. And then in addition to the rainfall threat, we've been talking about the possibility of some minor coastal flooding with this storm system as well. The wind field tends to expand somewhat when we have a landfalling tropical system, say over the Yucatan as it moves back out into the Gulf, and being over open water, those seas and the winds that build the storm surge is not necessarily confined to just within the storm itself. So we could be looking at some high swells and some minor coastal flooding across southeast Texas, coastal Louisiana, as we get into, say, the Monday, Tuesday time frame, possibly even on Sunday. This is the peak storm surge forecast for the area that's actually expected to see the landfall. 3 to 5 feet of storm surge expected around the Corpus Christi area, down towards Baffin Bay, up towards Matagorda Bay, and then 2 to 4 feet south down towards the Brownsville to the mouth of the Rio Grande River area. So significant flooding expected for those areas. Close to our area, we're looking at generally less than 3 feet of storm surge expected. And I'm going to show you the graphics here. This is Calcasieu Pass. The areas, the line in red there, that's the current observed trends. The line in the gray color, that's the forecast. And then the range there, you see that gray shaded region, that is the potential surge as the storm actually approaches and moves in. So you see by late Sunday into Monday, we start seeing that small storm surge that could lead to some of those coastal flooding issues, anywhere between 1, possibly up to 2 feet above normal tides with that minor coastal flooding. And it's not just at Calcasieu Pass. This is going to be essentially area-wide. So this is a look at Texas Point. You see very similar, if not possibly higher. The upper range for Texas Point is actually higher than 3 feet of surge. Now that is a bit of an outlier, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And then over at Lamar, over in South Central Louisiana, we're looking at, again, anywhere between about 1 to 1.5 feet of surge Monday into Tuesday. That could lead to some coastal flooding. This is not going to be necessarily based on the current forecast track. This is going to be somewhat similar to the coastal flooding that we saw with Tropical Storm Alberto when it made landfall across South Texas just a couple of weeks ago. So that kind of is somewhat of a proxy for that. This does look like it's going to be a little bit stronger of a storm. It's going to be a little bit closer. The surge values may be a little bit higher than what we saw with Alberto. But if you had issues with Alberto, you're probably going to be looking at similar issues with regards to coastal flooding with this storm system as it moves through the area. So that's what we have here this evening from the National Weather Service. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in our comments section over the next few minutes. I'll be happy to answer them for you. We are going to do another one of these briefings tomorrow evening, if not earlier. But at the latest, we'll do another one tomorrow evening to give you an update on what's going on. So let's go ahead and I'm going to backtrack here just a little bit. Pull the forecast track up there. And if you do have a question, throw it in there. I'll be happy to answer it for you. I'm going to have to back up just a little bit here, just to see what kind of questions we had towards the beginning. Amelia asked, could it be larger than a Category 1 when it makes landfall? It could be, but again, it's going to take some time for that storm to kind of get itself reorganized after it moves off the Yucatan Peninsula. The Hurricane Center, again, indicating about it's going to take about 24 hours before that re-intensification begins. So the limiting factor with this storm is going to be how long is it going to have over open water once it gets reorganized before it actually makes landfall. As of right now, the official forecast is calling for a Category 1 hurricane. Could it be a little bit higher than that? Yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Paul's asking, can this hurricane rapidly intensify? I don't expect rapid intensification with this storm because, again, it's going to take some time for it to kind of get itself reoriented. And then we are still looking at, we talked about earlier, some of the wind shear over the Gulf of Mexico. So conditions aren't going to be quite as favorable. You can see some of the wind shear in the Central Gulf, those kind of oranges and greens. Let me make this full screen for you. The lines there, that's where the hurricane actually is, it's spinning in on itself. But the orange is there over the Central Gulf of Mexico. That's some wind shear. So it's going to be dealing with that. I think that is going to be enough to stop rapid intensification. There is still going to be the possibility, we are expecting some intensification, but I don't expect it to be nearly as rapid as what we saw when the storm was in the Western Atlantic, when it underwent that rapid intensification cycle. I'm not expecting it to be that quick. And that's certainly good news because, it's only going to have about 2 days over the Gulf of Mexico. Let's see. Emily asked, why do you not trust the ICON model? I don't trust any single model ever. Again, what we look for, and if you've been with me or followed these briefings for any significant length of time, what we look for in computer models is we want a consensus. We want to see a lot of models or all of the models showing a very similar track or ideally a nearly identical track for both the track and intensity. So we never hang our hat on one single model, and I strongly encourage you to do the same. Don't ever look at one model, especially one example or one run of one model, and say, that's it, that's what I'm believing, and that's it. That's not the way models work, and that's not the way they're meant to work. What we do with computer models is we put in all the data that we have available, and then we run different mathematical equations through them that are slightly different each time. And what it spits out is a slightly different solution. And what we want to see is all of those solutions, kind of very close together to one another. That gives us high confidence in what the eventual forecast track is going to be. So we don't rely on any single model ever. And I recommend you don't do the same. Okay, Chris says, time to fill gallon jugs and freeze them in case the power goes out. Not necessarily a bad idea. It's always a good idea to have a plan. We've been telling you for several days to have a plan in place, and it's for this possible eventuality. Even though the overall risk is still very low, but it's not zero. So we always want you to have a plan in place. What are you going to do if the storm, just sideswipes us or moves just a little bit further north? What are you going to do in the event of a direct hit? It's always a good idea to have a plan for each of those potential eventualities. Heather asked, do we need to be worried in the Houston area? I know Cleveland has already had issues with flooding this year, and if it slips further up the coast, I know several concerned with rivers rising. Just similar to what we're expecting here in Southeast Texas and Southwest Louisiana, I think the biggest issue with Houston, based on the current track, is going to be the potential for heavy rainfall. There is going to be some coastal flooding right along the immediate coastline. That's not going to get very far inland, though. It's not going to get into the Houston metro. The bigger issue for you is going to be the potential for heavy rain and flash flooding that way. And yeah, that could potentially lead to some river flooding. Chelsea says, but what if it shifts more east? I mean, it's been a steady trend the last 6 runs. If the computer model consensus shifts further to the east, the forecast track will shift further to the east as well. That's why we have this cone of uncertainty. We don't say that this is the end all be all and that it's not going to change. The forecast track is always subject to change. And that's why we have the cone that we do, because the center of the storm could wind up anywhere within this cone. It could very well stay on the eastern side of this cone, and we could be looking at a landfall somewhere in Galveston. We here in Southeast Texas and Southwest Louisiana are technically in the cone of uncertainty right now. That's part of the reason why we started doing briefings this evening. So yes, changes in the forecast track are certainly possible. This is our best track based on the current forecast information and the current model information that we have, but it is subject to change. Megan asks, what are the probabilities of coastal flooding for southeastern Vermilion Parish? Based on the current track, you're going to see some minor coastal flooding. We're looking at anywhere between probably 1 to 2 feet of surge values as far east as Vermilion Parish. Even if the storm does make landfall on Corpus Christi area, the swells from the winds that are building on the east side of the storm will eventually move to the coast and move inland, and you are going to get some minor flooding with that. We're not expecting it to be any kind of a significant storm surge, but you're going to notice it. It's definitely going to be enough to cause some flooding right along the immediate coastline, and any roads or infrastructure that's in that area is subject to being flooding. Again, I'm kind of using Alberto a few weeks ago as somewhat of a proxy for what we're expecting with that. If you had issues during Alberto from that coastal flooding, you're probably going to have the same issues or similar issues with this one. Kathy asks, is the rain amounts, wind conditions all based on landfall at Corpus? Will they become stronger if the landfall shifts closer? Yes. All of the graphics you saw with the probabilities, those are all based on the current landfall expected at Corpus. If that track shifts further to the east, then yes, those probabilities will go higher. Patty asks, how much rain should we expect Sunday afternoon and evening versus Saturday afternoon and evening, trying to decide when to head home from Southwest Louisiana for holiday travel? Sunday is looking like the better day. Tomorrow we're going to have, I think, more showers and thunderstorms around. Sunday we're going to have a little bit less. So of the two, Sunday is going to be your better day. Phyllis says, I think we need to worry more about the rain on radar now. Have you seen it? Just sitting there, worrisome, just about to get here. I have not seen the radar. I've been putting together this briefing package, so I haven't been keeping a close eye on radar. That's not to say that there isn't someone doing so. We do have forecasters in our operations area right now watching that radar. But me personally, no, I haven't been looking at it too much because I've been putting this briefing together here this evening. Nathaniel says, why isn't Donald bringing up Laura? Is it taboo to talk about now? I've heard of Harvey and others, but no Laura and Delta. Well, I'm just using them as an example. I'm not deliberately avoiding Laura, although if I never had to speak her name again, that would be perfectly fine with me. But no, I'm not necessarily avoiding Laura, but it's just a completely different situation. Okay, let's see. Several people are talking about the icon model on here. Again, I want to reiterate, just like we talked about a minute ago, do not focus on a single model or a single run of a single model. I feel like I'm kind of throwing that out into the wind there because people have been doing it for years and are probably going to continue to do it. But that is not the way to forecast. There is no one model that's going to be like, ooh, this is the golden child. This is the model that's going to have it right. We won't know that until afterwards, if there's any at all that is completely right. It's kind of like spinning a wheel on a slot machine. Yeah, you can say which one was right after, which things are going to come up correctly after you've already seen the spin. But beforehand, you don't know for sure. So that's why we never rely on a single model or a single model run. We look for that consensus approach like we were talking about earlier. Kellen asks, for the Galveston Bay area, are there going to be any impacts for those areas? Yes, you're going to see more significant impacts down towards the Galveston Bay area. We don't specifically cover that area. That's actually covered by the Weather Service Houston office. So they'll have more details than I'll have. I've been focusing more of kind of southeast Texas. We cover north of Galveston Bay up to Jefferson County. But yeah, you will see higher impacts as we go further south down towards the Galveston Bay area. Let's see, just kind of glancing from the Hurricane Center, that your probabilities of tropical storm force winds are going to be a little higher. So we're looking at generally probably about 30 to 40% chance of those tropical storm probabilities. You're probably going to see a similar rainfall. We're looking at anywhere between about 4 to up to 8 inches of rainfall. And the storm surge, that doesn't look like it goes as far up to Galveston Bay, but you're still going to be looking at probably somewhere in the range of 2 to 4 foot of storm surge that could lead to some coastal flooding in and around the Galveston Bay area. Maricela Am I saying that right? Do you think we need to evacuate in Port Arthur, Texas? Not right now. No, I don't think that's not necessarily necessary at this point. Kelsey asks, is there a chance the storm makes landfall closer to Galveston? Yes, there is a chance. Galveston is in that cone of uncertainty. You can see it's right there. So yeah, that track, there is a possibility that it could be shifted further to the north. That's not necessarily out of the realm of possibility. And if it is, the Galveston area would see more substantial impacts, obviously. Chelsea says, just about every run y'all have shown has been wrong except icon model. Well, first off, we don't show computer models in this office, so it certainly wasn't us. I'm not sure who you've been looking at your computer models from, but as you just so appropriately pointed out, they were all wrong. So that's why we don't listen to a single computer model. Again, icon or otherwise, we look for that consensus approach. Dylan says, will Beaumont get flooded? It's hard to say exactly what areas are going to actually see flooding. That's why we do it all in probabilities, because we can't say whether one specific location or another is actually going to see flooding. There is going to be a risk. We're looking at anywhere between 4 to 8 inches of rainfall over the next 5 days. Most of that is going to be Monday and Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday. And then we could be looking at some of those training bands setting up across areas. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. I can't say for certain that you're going to flood, but there is a risk of flash flooding with this in the Beaumont area, yes. Terry asks, could it pull a Harvey? And I'm assuming you mean, will it slow down and stall and not move? We're not expecting that, not at this point. Again, that trough that we were talking about earlier, that's kind of up here, that's going to continue to kind of lift it. Once it makes landfall, it's going to lift it into the trough. It's going to be absorbed by that trough and then pushed off to the northeast. So I don't see a situation where the steering currents are going to just collapse and the storms just kind of meander over an area for days like Harvey did. No, I don't see that at this point. Dusty says, so is evacuation recommended since we don't know what it's going to do yet? No, not anywhere in southeast Texas or southwest Louisiana. Now, evacuation orders, I'm not familiar with what's being offered further south across the Corpus Christi area down towards Brownsville, but there is no plans for evacuation orders right now across southeast Texas or southwest Louisiana. We're not even close to that point yet. You know, the storm is still expected to make landfall well to the south. So no, there's been no talk of that as of yet. That's not to say that there aren't contingency plans in place, you know, should that track shift further to the north, but no, we're not there yet. Dane asks, with the Gulf being so warm, can it be really bad hurricane? Right now, again, we talked about there are very warm waters over there that is supportive of additional development. There they are, anywhere between about 85 and 87 degrees across the Gulf of Mexico. So that certainly favors development. But there's also going to be some wind shear across the central Gulf, and I think that's going to limit any opportunity for rapid intensification. We are going to be looking at some intensification. It is expected to make landfall as a Category 1 hurricane, but right now we're not expecting it to be a rapid intensification because conditions are not going to be ideal. They're going to be favorable, but they're not going to be perfect the way they were across the western Atlantic when Beryl intensified from a tropical storm to a major hurricane in just a little over, about 30 hours or so. Brittany says, I just saw this live was happening. Can you recap what to expect? All of the live briefing is going to be available as a recording just as soon as we finish with the live part. So you can go back and review it in its entirety. I think you can actually rewind it now. You don't even have to wait. So you can go back to the beginning and get the full briefing. Brian asked, what is the probability or possibility of this storm moving up the coast to the Texas-Louisiana border? Well, that area is in the cone of uncertainty, so it's not out of the realm of possibility. I don't think it's particularly likely at this point. Do I think there's a possibility that this track could be shifted further to the north? Yes, I do. In fact, I think it's somewhat likely we're going to see it kind of continuing to nudge a little bit further to the north, but I don't expect it to make it all the way to say the Texas-Louisiana coastline. That's an unlikely scenario at this point. Not impossible, but unlikely. James asks, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? 7. Bob asks, will you be posting this briefing? Yes, it'll be available as a recording on Facebook, X, and YouTube just as soon as we actually finish the live part of it. Alicia asks, any chance it'll turn towards Louisiana like Rita did? Again, the coastal parts of western Louisiana is in that cone of uncertainty. I don't think it's a particularly likely scenario, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. Next update at 10, right? Ask Quisty. The next update from the Hurricane Center will be out at 10. We're not going to do another live briefing with that one. We're not going to do another one of these until tomorrow. But yes, the next update from the Hurricane Center will be out at 10 p.m. Felicia asks, if my apartment has water at the door from a thunderstorm, should I relocate us and my kids? I need advice, y'all. Well, that depends on how much water is actually in the street if you can get out. If you can't, then I wouldn't necessarily risk getting stalled in a vehicle from those thunderstorm or from those floodwaters. You'd be much safer in your house than you are in a vehicle during flooding. Big Johnson 1978 asked, do you think Lake Charles Moss Bluff residents will have to board up windows before the storm makes landfall? Not right now, because we're not expecting even tropical storm force winds in our area. So I don't expect that to be an issue based on the current forecast track. Yes, I did just say Big Johnson on the air. What about it? Dylan asked, what day is it making landfall? It's making landfall sometime during the day on Monday. Right now, officially, it looks like sometime late morning to around noontime on Monday. Taylor asked, why were all the models initializing low early on? Well, the models were, I think, kind of further south. That's partially due to how far out in time it was. We were still looking at, when it was back across in the Caribbean, we were looking at, that was the day 5, 6, 7 forecast. And so exactly where that trough was going to be, where that ridge was going to be, was still there was a very wide spread there. So, as we've gotten closer in time, as is always the case, we see those models begin to cluster together more. So that's why we're seeing a little bit of difference in the track now. The other thing that's going on is we are doing what are called special weather balloon releases. We're releasing more balloons, so we're getting more data to go into our computer models. That helps improve the computer model output as well. Jared's asking what factors are influencing the speed of the storm. It's kind of what we just talked about, that ridge that's over the southeastern U.S. and the trough that's digging across the central U.S. That's what's steering the storm, and that's what's going to keep it moving. So you've got some steering currents moving kind of to the northwest with this ridge out over the southeastern U.S. You also have this trough that's kind of draped across the central U.S. up in here. That's helping to pull it northwesterly and then eventually northerly, and you can see it kind of actually turning more northeasterly into that trough by about day 5 or so. So that's actually what's steering the storm, and that's what's going to kind of keep it moving, and that's what's controlling the speed. Laura asks, is it possible for it to not hit Beaumont, Lumberton, Texas? Right now, we're not expecting it to make a direct landfall in the Beaumont, Lumberton, Texas area. We are expecting rain. There's a very high probability that you're going to see some significant rain from this. So that's going to be the biggest impact in the Beaumont area right now. Randy asked, what causes the storm to slow down? A storm will slow down when those steering currents that we were talking about, those winds in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. Let me see if I can find them here. This is what we're talking about here. This is an example of those winds. When those are very light or calm, then there's nothing to actually drive the storm, and that's what causes the storm to either slow down or potentially stall. Now, we're not expecting that in this case, because again, looking, you can see, get rid of this, come back to here. So you can see there's this high pressure area, this ridge over the southeastern U.S. Winds around that spin clockwise, okay? We've also got this trough that I was talking about across the central U.S. The winds are kind of going from west to east here, kind of southeast and south, or east then southwest. So initially this ridge over here in the southeastern U.S., that's going to be pushing Beryl to the northeast. Then as it gets under the influence of this trough, it's going to be turning to the north and then off to the northeast. So there's always going to be some kind of steering current that's steering this storm. So we don't expect those steering currents to collapse and the storm to actually completely stall out, and that's why. Trailgrass is their weather from the north right now coming to southwest Louisiana. That trough we just talked about is bringing a weak, quote-unquote, cold front, and that's going to bring us some showers and thunderstorms tomorrow. There's actually some out there this evening, but it's not going to certainly bring us any cooler weather. But yeah, there is a feature that's bringing us some higher rainfall. Chelsea says, you should just say, I don't know at this point. There are plenty of things that we don't know, and I'm happy to tell you what we don't know, but I'm here to tell you also what we do know. Christy says, do you feel, depending on the movement of the low, it's strengthening more in the Gulf and becoming a major hurricane hitting Louisiana? Right now, we do not expect it to become a major hurricane again. We are expecting it to become a Category 1 hurricane before landfall. And no, we don't expect a direct impact on Louisiana, although Louisiana, western Louisiana, is in that cone of uncertainty. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But right now, it doesn't appear very likely. Sam Spence says, is this a delayed retaliation from the British to ruin what was a great 4th of July? That would be a hell of a long-term game plan for the British. I'm going to go with no, but that's the kind of things that very creative novels are made out of. There was a time where there was a conspiracy going around that Hurricane Katrina was some kind of retaliation by the Japanese for World War II. I heard that one before. Some people are very creative and have way too much time on their hands. Sylvia says, if it does happen to head to southwest Louisiana, when will state officials notify residents? I'm not sure what you're talking about them notifying of. I mean, I'm notifying you now what's going on, and if the track shifts, we'll certainly notify you. As far as evacuations go, those tend to begin roughly 48 hours before landfall, or sometimes a little bit further, depending on the exact time frame of the storm system. But that's also going to be highly dependent on what this track eventually winds up doing. If there are going to be any kind of evacuation, issues or orders, I would expect those sometime either probably Sunday, if I had to guess, maybe tomorrow, depending on the track. But right now, we're not expecting that to be necessary. Jade asked, what does my gut say is going to happen? Well, the thing about weather and the thing about forecasting is we don't use our gut. We use science. We don't do feelings around here. We're scientists. All of our forecasts are based on science and physics and computer models and math and that kind of stuff. We don't do feelings necessarily to forecast. But based on everything I've seen so far with regards to the tracks, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see this track shift a little bit further to the north across parts of central Texas. I don't expect us to be looking at a direct landfall here. Again, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but based on everything I've seen right now, there are going to be some changes in this track, possibly to the north. It's more likely we'll see this shift further to the north than we do to the south at this point. We'll see how that goes. Den asks, I know you can't predict until it's organized and lands, but do you see Youngsville, Lafayette, Central Acadiana areas needing to take flooding, heavy rains, and precautions in this area? I do expect there to be some rain. The overall risk of flooding is going to be a little bit lower. Come back. Across, say, central Louisiana, just because of how the orientation of the storm is expected to be. Now, there is still a risk. You can see there is a slight risk of flash flooding across the Lafayette, Acadiana area as we go into Tuesday and possibly into Wednesday. But the heavier rainfall based on the current forecast track, which you can see here, it's going to be East Texas, extreme western Louisiana. I think that's where the heaviest is going to be, at least across our area. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that you could see several inches across the Acadiana region. Trevor says, what would the cat size be if it stayed in the Gulf and ended up coming to Louisiana? We're probably still looking at a cat 1, maybe a cat 2. I can't rule out, because if it moves further to the north, it may be over the Gulf a little bit longer. I'm still not expecting a major hurricane, even if it was to move towards the Louisiana area. Amelia asked about tornadoes. There is a low-end tornado risk. There's always a tornado risk when we're talking about a landfalling tropical system, especially with some of those rain bands as the storm decays. I think the highest risk, if we're going to see any, is going to be East Texas and extreme western Louisiana. It's a little too early to talk about exactly what kind of risk there is, but yes, there will be a tornado risk if this pans out across our area. It tends to be fairly low, but it is there. Amy says, some forecasters have stated that the storm is going to slow down some when it reaches the Gulf. Will that aid in intensification of the storm if it stays over the water for a longer period of time? Yeah, it is going to slow down some, but that's taken into account in the Hurricane Center's forecast. Now, if it slows down more, that would mean more time over the Gulf of Mexico. That would mean a potentially stronger storm. But, you know, the slowing, which is expected, is accounted for in the Hurricane Center's forecast track and intensity. So if that winds up being off and it winds up being over water longer, then yes, that would lead to a stronger storm. Trevor asks, is it a good idea to vacation to Galveston Monday? Trevor, shut your face. No. Also shut up. Emily says that was Matagorda Bay you pointed out. I know that was 15 minutes ago. I'm just getting to some of these questions now. I'm sorry if I pointed to the wrong thing, Emily. I certainly believe you. Let me bounce forward here a little bit so I can catch up with some of your comments. There's a lot of them on here. I'm admittedly I'm gonna skip over a few questions and come up to a little bit closer because there's a whole bunch of them here. Eric asks, what about rain in the San Antonio area? That's not out of the realm of possibility, but the San Antonio area, regardless of where this winds up tracking, is going to be on well to the west of pretty much all of the rainfall. So I wouldn't expect more than just maybe a couple of light showers. I'm not expecting a lot of rain over that way. The San Antonio office does have its own National Weather Service, though, so they would have more details about that. David asked, when will we start to experience impacts from, say, Matagorda Bay to Galveston? You're going to be looking at those impacts beginning. Let me see if I can pull the graphic back up here. Give me a second. So this is the most likely time of arrival for tropical storm force winds. You're going to be looking at probably sometime early Monday morning for those tropical storm force winds if you're going to see them. Rain will probably precede that. You're probably going to be looking at some rain Sunday night. But Monday morning, early Monday morning for the tropical storm force winds in the Galveston down towards Matagorda Bay area. Okay. Doug asks, any chance that the trough will come down and move it more north? Well, we're expecting the trough to come down, and it is going to influence it. That's why we are going to get this northward turn eventually and then northeastward. Now, right now, it's expected to occur after the storm makes landfall. Could it be a little bit earlier? Yes. That's why we have that cone, and we may see that cone shift a little bit further to the north or to the east with the updates here that are coming out. In fact, we got another update coming here in about 30 minutes or thereabout. Paula asked, when is the next report coming in from the Hurricane Hunters? I'm not sure what the Hurricane Hunters aircraft schedule is. I didn't get a chance to look at that before I came on here. But they've been out in this storm, not constantly, but pretty close to it since it was in the Eastern Caribbean. So they're making regular flights into it. Brittany asks, how early could western Louisiana start to experience rain? Well, we're expecting pretty good rain tomorrow, actually. There is going to be a chance of rain Sunday. The rain related to Beryl is probably going to be early Monday morning beginning. That's when we're expecting it. And then Tuesday into Wednesday, we're going to see that continue. Teresa asks, do you think this will hinder air traffic Sunday through Tuesday at Houston airports? Probably not Sunday, probably not even Monday, maybe Tuesday. But again, we're not expecting wind to be a huge issue in the Houston area. I think it's going to be more rain. So yeah, delays from storms are quite common, but I don't expect it to be, extreme. Rima asks, how much precipitation? Generally over the 5-day period from now through next Wednesday, we're looking at anywhere between 4 to 8 inches of rainfall in total. Make this full screen for you so you can take a look at it. That's what we're looking at. You can see the legend if I get myself out of the way here. The bright yellows there, that's a 4 to 6 inch range for southeast Texas and western Louisiana. The oranges, 6 to 8 inches. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But we could see some higher rainfall totals than that if we see any of these rain bands kind of set up across the area. Jared says, will this storm hit Miami? It's a joke. I watched and listened to the entire broadcast. I'm thankful for you, Jared, because some people don't. We do get a lot of interesting questions on here, don't we? I'll try to answer as many of them as I can. Let's see, just scrolling through comments here, trying to find the questions. JS, how will this affect Vernon Parish and the northern Leesville area? Similar to everywhere else, the biggest issue is going to be rain. You can see the rain there. Looking at anywhere between 4 to up to 6 inches of rain in that area. So we could be looking at some flash flooding with that. That's going to be your biggest concern. Obviously, you don't have any storm surge concerns. We're not expecting a wind issue. Can't rule out maybe a tornado or two with some of these storms, but rain is by far going to be the biggest concern for you. Hava asks, what exactly is the dirty side of the hurricane? Well, that's the one that has an OnlyFans. I'm just kidding. The quote-unquote dirty side of a hurricane is generally the right side of the hurricane. That's where the highest moisture and the highest wind speed tends to be. So that's why we kind of call it the dirty side. The western side of a storm tends to be narrower. It tends to not have as strong winds, and it tends to have less overall rainfall. So the eastern side of the storm, especially the northeastern side of a storm, is the one that tends to be the strongest and have the most rainfall, the most significant impact. So that's why some people call it the quote-unquote dirty side of the storm. Tab asks, could it skirt the coast and then move inland? Yeah, in fact, it's going to do something along those lines. I wouldn't necessarily say skirt per se, but it is going to be kind of moving, not parallel to the coast, but it's going to be moving kind of northeast across East Texas. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. We could see a little bit sharper turn. I don't think it's going to be right along the coastline, but it could be a little bit closer, a little bit sharper turn, and more of that northeastern pull to it. That's not out of the realm of possibility. Amanda says, I don't want to get flooded and lose electricity. Is that something we should be concerned about as of now? Flooding is going to be a concern. You can saw what we saw before this last question here. We are looking at a flash flooding threat. It's not particularly high, but there is a roughly 15% chance right now of seeing flash flooding. Power outages, I don't think they're going to be any higher than any other storm that we're dealing with. I'm not saying that we couldn't see some, but this is not going to be a situation where winds are going to knock down power lines and we're going to be out of power for days or weeks at a time, a la Laura or Delta. We could see a couple of power outages here and there, but I'm not expecting widespread power outages, and I'm not expecting them to be particularly long-lived, maybe a few hours at most. Okay, just running through some questions here, trying to catch up again. I'm sorry if I'm trying to get it to as many as I can. I'm not going to be able to answer every single one of them because there are a lot in here at the moment. Rima asks, is there anything behind this that we should be keeping an eye on? No, there was a tropical wave the Hurricane Center was monitoring in the Atlantic that had a low probability of development. That one's kind of since dissipated. There's not really a lot to it. So no, at the moment, this is the only game in town. We're not seeing anything else out there that we're really keeping an eye on at the moment. Shiva says, hey, Donald, is there any update on the weather tonight? Any severe tornado threat tonight? No, we don't have a real severe threat or tornado threat tonight. We are looking at, we do have some showers and thunderstorms out there, but no, this is not a tornadic environment or a severe weather environment. So it's mainly going to be just some showers and thunderstorms. And that'll go through tomorrow too. We're going to be looking at pretty good rain chances tomorrow. I've seen several questions asking, could it take a turn and hit Cameron Parish? Asked Taylor, could it hit Louisiana, et cetera, et cetera. Let me try to answer several of these at once. And again, the fact of the matter is that's why we have this cone of uncertainty, because yes, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Southwest Louisiana and Southeast Texas are both within that cone of uncertainty right now. It's not likely, we're kind of right on the eastern edge of that cone, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility at this point. I do expect that there probably will be some slight continued northerly move or updates to this forecast track here. Again, I don't want to say it's likely, but it's not possible. It's not completely impossible either. That's kind of the best I can do with those questions right now. John said, someone said there was going to be a tornado outbreak. If you're talking about tornadoes related to Beryl, there's often is tornadoes with landfalling tropical systems. I wouldn't necessarily call it an outbreak necessarily, but yeah, we could see a few tornadoes with some of the rain bands as Beryl makes landfall. Doug asks, is there another system possible behind Beryl? No, we're not seeing any other systems at this point behind Beryl. Hurricane Chaser Chase says, I want to say I love what you're doing here. Keep it up. Thank you, Hurricane Chaser Chase. Sam says, if we sacrifice Donald doubters, will that make the storm go away? Let's not get violent here now. Come on, we're not here to. It's okay. It's good. It's all fine. A lot of people around my office claim that the reason Hurricane Laura hit us was because I accidentally knocked over a bobblehead doll we have. So there might be some truth to that. I can't speak to that, but we made sure to put the bobblehead doll away this time, so it's not in danger of getting damaged by me or anybody else. Let's see, Dane asked, will it go more to Texas or Louisiana with the next update? I think that more likely we're going to see another slight northward shift of this track with the next update. I don't want to kind of anticipate what the Hurricane Center is going to do, but that seems slightly more likely than not. I don't expect it to be really dramatic, though, at least not at this point. We'll get that update actually probably in about 20 minutes or so. Kathy asks, is that airplanes flying over you? I'm guessing you're hearing the noise behind me. No, that's our air conditioner. Ain't nothing I can do about that, unfortunately. Janet says, Marathon Live. Yes, we've been on here for a while. It's been over an hour now, so I think we're going to wrap it up here shortly. Kathleen asks, will school be closed? Y'all got jokes now. See, this is why we got to wrap it up here. It's starting to get out of hand. We're getting the chaos coming out. Yom says, I'm flying back from Mexico to Houston on Wednesday morning. You think it'll be safe to do so, rain or wind? I think you're probably going to be okay by Wednesday. By Wednesday, you can see on the forecast track behind me here, you're going to be looking at the remnants now moving kind of into northeast Texas, Arkansas. So, yeah, you should be fine by that point. Brianna says, should we expect an Imelda-like event in southeast Texas? Again, right now, rain and minor storm surge, 1 to 2 feet. That's what we're looking at right now. I don't expect this to be necessarily Imelda. It's just going to be, 4 to 8 inches of rain-ish. I know we're doing Facebook Lives now, but I don't want you to freak out and start panicking yet, because the effects across our area are still expected to be relatively low. It's mainly just going to be the rain. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the time being. If you do have a question that I missed, and I do realize that I did miss some of them because we had a whole lot of them on there, feel free to shoot me a direct message on our Facebook page. I'll be happy to answer it that way. You can also, what is it now? Tweet us, whatever you want to call it. Send us a message on X. We'll be happy to answer it that way at NWS Lake Charles. We're also on Instagram. You can send us a message that way. You can also email me if you'd like directly. Email's on your screen there, donald.jones@noaa.gov, and I'll be happy to answer your question that way. You can also give us a call here at our office if you want to talk to a forecaster directly. Area code 337-477-5285. Again, we're going to have another update out here from the Hurricane Center in about 20 minutes. I'll have that posted on our social media pages as soon as it comes out. We're not going to do another one of these briefings tonight because we're just wrapping up this one. But we will have another one tomorrow to give you an update on the latest and greatest regarding that. In the meantime, if you do have a question between now and then, all those methods we just talked about to get in touch with us, we'll be happy to answer any burning questions that you have. In the meantime, everyone have a wonderful rest of your evening. Stay safe, stay cool. It is still very warm out there, although I think the storms tomorrow will keep the temperatures a little bit more tolerable. We'll only be in the lower 90s instead of the mid 90s, and it feels like 110. So I guess we'll take the break when we can get it. Everyone have a wonderful evening. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.